German cabaret artist Dieter Nuhr coined the phrase, "If you've no idea, just shut up." But I don't do that. And I advise you don't as well, because if you keep your mouth shut, you won't ask any questions. And what better reason could there be to ask questions than to be ignorant? I am interested in the ominous phenomenon of enlightenment, which exists in Buddhism and is also described as an awakening experience in Christianity. Conversations with friends showed me that I'm not the only one. During the Corona period, many people shouted slogans such as "Wake up!" to help the non-enlightened who were described as sleeping sheep to awaken, or to insult them, which was not always very clear. So it must be something important, the awakening to the realization of the truth, especially in times of crisis, and this is where we are now, despite the subsiding of the coronavirus waves. Personally, I prefer the old-fashioned way of contemplation rather than the technological ones of WhatsApp and the like. Headlines don't always tell the whole truth. On the other hand, you will find far fewer clear indications this way. There are often hints that you let sink in, even though they raise more questions than they answer. The easiest way should be to ask those who are already enlightened for answers in order to shed light on your own darkness. Shunryu Suzuki is regarded as one of the most important Zen masters of the 20th century. He migrated from Japan to the USA, where he founded the San Francisco Zen Center, which still exists today. He died of cancer there in 1971. When I told him about it, my friend Tobias said, then he wasn't enlightened. A Zen master who is still alive was confronted with the question of how she would react to a violent attack. She replied, "I would probably get it with fear and run away." A third Zen master from Korea, who I met at a lecture in the Ruhr area, reported that he had got into the habit of sitting up quickly as soon as he woke up, which unfortunately led to a painful experience during his visit to Germany, as his bed was directly under a sloping roof. I didn't see any of them walking on water or performing miracles. Instead, they reacted stressed or carelessly, or with illness to what was happening around them and within them. That's human, but it seems a bit unenlightened, as Tobias said. If you know the truth, you can't hit your head. Or can you? We give negative labels to things we don't like. Who has ever heard a workman hitting his thumb with a hammer shout something like "sunshine" or "crookus" or "dessert"? Most people prefer fake coined curses. Who welcomes pain? We would prefer to avoid it, and we are prepared to go to great lengths to do so. A good example is inventing airbags and medication. But what would life be like without pain? Paradise? Let's ask the Masilli family from Italy. They know a thing or two about it. Their daughter, for example, broke her shoulder while skiing. She only realized a day later. Her sister had a similar experience. She also injured herself frequently and then ignored the injury. It was all half as bad. Her children often suffered burns, but what the hell? It's just stupid when treatment is given too late, like always. The members of the Masilli family don't know pain. This leads to carelessness, an increased willingness to take risks and susceptibility to injury. Their familial analgesia, meaning insensitivity to pain, is due to a hereditary mutation on chromosome 14. Despite a normally functioning sense of touch, smell and taste, apart from the perception of the spiciness of chili peppers, affected people are unable to perceive pain or heat. Even if some genetic changes result in painlessness, it must be said that they are extremely rare. The ability to feel pain is therefore so important that it has been preserved through many stages of evolution. This has not escaped the notice of many spiritual seekers. In addition to enlightenment, they also search for the meaning of pain, which is so inescapable. Could there possibly be a connection? Are we not equipped with a nervous system that makes us flinch when we touch a hot plate before we even realize that it is hot? The immediate experience of the now without thinking, which pain can give us, does it not somehow correspond to the experience of enlightenment, which is entirely in the here and now, just not as relaxed as one would like it to be? In many spiritual teachings, pain is seen as a means of realization and inner transformation. By living through pain and suffering, people can gain deep insights and grow personally. In some spiritual traditions, it is taught that dealing with pain can promote letting go and acceptance. By learning to accept and let go of pain, rather than placing it at the center of one's existence, one can find inner peace and experience spiritual growth. Quite profanely, the very first experience of pain in life causes us to develop behavioral patterns of pain avoidance. We don't want it, it's stupid, it hurts, it restricts us, and sometimes it can really become unbearable. In our duality, we find heaven beautiful and hell horrible. The former is associated with bliss, the latter with pain. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master who died in 2022, gave direction with this saying, "No mud, no lotus." He drew attention to the connection between the two phenomena.
And this sheet of paper, which has the left and the right. And we know that we cannot take the left out of the right and the right out of the left. You cannot come and take the right and go to Bordeaux and the left to go to Toulouse. No, they are always together. You cannot take them out of each other. And that is the teaching of interbeing in Buddhism. Interbeing means you cannot be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with us. The left has to interbe with the right. The left is not the enemy of the right. The left has to lean on the right in order to manifest herself. And the right has to lean on the left in order to manifest herself. So this is the mind of non-discrimination. But if we continue with our mind of discrimination, we distort everything. And we oppose matter to mind, left and right, and so on. And last week we also learned that suffering and happiness, they are not enemies. They are. Suffering is made of happiness, and happiness is made of suffering. If there is no suffering, there is no happiness. And if there is no happiness, there is no suffering. It's like the lotus flower and mud. If there is no mud, you cannot grow lotus. And the lotus stay there for some time and become the mud again. So looking into the lotus, you see the mud. And looking into the mud, you see future lotus. So suffering is like that. Someone who has the capacity to go back to himself and listen to his own suffering and look deeply into his suffering, he will be able to understand that suffering inside of him that carries with it the suffering of his father, his mother, his ancestors. And getting in touch with suffering inside helps you to understand your own suffering. And understanding suffering gives rise to compassion. And when compassion arises, you suffer less right away. Because you see the path of transformation and healing.
The dream of enlightenment, as it haunts Western brains, therefore seems to have little to do with reality. And yet, of course, there is something extremely tempting about it. Giving up all illusion, recognizing reality as it is and making peace with it. The idea of not only coming to terms with yourself, but also with your environment, because you finally understand it. Wouldn't that change the world? No wonder I jumped at the long-awaited Lotus Essence, first produced by the Flower Essence Society in California in the early 1980s. Patricia Kaminsky and Richard Katz, the makers of this essence, attribute the following properties to it. Expansive and inclusive spirituality. Ability to synthesize diverse life experience in service to the spiritual world. It seems to me that they too offer more questions than answers. What could such an essence be used for? They write, spiritual pride, inflated sense of self, out of touch with ordinary personality and humble tasks. But why lotus blossom? What is it all about? The lotus represents values and qualities that are particularly valued in Buddhism. It is used as metaphor for spiritual awakening and purity. The following characteristics should make it clear why this is the case. First, enlightenment. The fully blossomed lotus flower represents enlightenment or awakening. It grows in muddy waters, ponds and lakes with slow-moving water. Although it is rooted in the mud, the flower itself always remains above the surface of the water. Similarly, the spiritual seeker goes through different stages of development. Just as the flower opens its petals to receive the sunlight, the spiritual practitioner has to open themselves to receive the light of wisdom and enlightenment. The knowledge is already there, but you alone bring to bloom what was already laid in the mud. The reason why you do not yet possess it is because you have not opened yourself up to it. The primary task of the Lotus Essence would be to enable and promote this. Second, compassion. In some Buddhist traditions, the lotus is associated with compassion, kindness, and love for all living beings. The lotus flower goes through a remarkable cycle of growth. It begins with germination in the mud, then grows through the realm of the water, and finally the flower reaches the surface where it opens to full splendor. This growth pattern is often seen as a representation of the spiritual path from material existence to enlightenment. Its ability to grow out of the dirt and still bloom beautifully symbolizes a skill encouraged in Buddhism, namely cultivating compassion amid suffering. Third, non-attachment. The leaves of the lotus flower are covered with tiny hairs that repel water. When rain falls or drops accumulate on the leaves, they simply roll off, taking dirt and dust with them. In Buddhism, this self-cleaning property symbolizes immaculateness and purity. As the lotus flower floats on water without getting wet, it is seen as a symbol of non-attachment. It represents the ability to exist in the world without being negatively affected by worldly affairs. The lotus is also characterized by its longevity and amazing lifespan. The seeds can remain viable for many centuries. This symbolizes spiritual stamina and endurance. Moreover, lotus can be used in many different ways. Both leaves and seeds are edible and are used as food in some cultures. The plant is also used in traditional medicine. Among other things, it is said to have anti-inflammatory properties, and it also contains antioxidants that can help combat cell damage caused by free radicals and support general health. It is said to have calming and stress-relieving properties, and its use can contribute to relaxation. In some cultures, lotus flower is also used in skincare products as it is considered to be moisturizing, soothing and skin firming. However, this is not 100% scientifically proven, but based on traditional applications. The Lumbo nucifera, the original lotus plant, is definitely safe, and the worst that can happen is that the desired effect does not materialize. Nevertheless, as there are also species that are not suitable for consumption, so you should be sure which one you use. In the second part of the lotus flower video, we will take a closer look at the lotus essences. There are quite a few of them, and 7 have been combined into a set. The next video is about them.